This week in London, the United Nations International Maritime Organization, many of you know it as IMO, is meeting to decide on what could be the world's first emissions fee, levy, tax, whatever you want to call it. Of course, they're going to tell you that this is not a tax, this is just a levy. But when we're talking about a $13 billion fee being applied to everything you use that is shipped across the world, everything you wear, everything you eat, it's certainly going to feel like a tax to you and I. So the IMO is a special organization within the United Nations. It's based out of London. And its primary goal is to set the rules, basically, for international shipping. Things like safety, pollution control, and now, of course, climate compliance. And what they're discussing this week is what they call the net zero framework. This net zero framework would apply to every ship over 5,000 tons, which I guess you could say covers about 85% of global shipments. Under this plan, they would levy a fee of about $100 per ton of CO2 for every ship that's not in compliance. As the plan goes on, though, that $100 fee per ton of CO2 goes up to $380. Now, the total of this is estimated to only be about $11 to $13 billion a year that would then go to the IMO, which is a UN special organization. It goes into what they would refer to as the IMO Net Zero Fund. And this fund would then reward people who are within climate compliance with the other people's money. So this fund is basically going to be rewarding low emission ships, building green fuel funds, supporting training programs on climate control, and then of course help developing countries with what they consider a just transformation. But here's the thing, it all sounds good on paper, right? But this money gives the IMO a considerable amount of financial leverage. This financial leverage to the UN, who is gaining this money off of levying, or as some would say, taxing these ships that aren't in compliance, would help determine who wins, who loses, and in general, how global trade evolves. It makes the UN no longer a regulator, and it turns the UN into a funding power. So some of you are probably thinking, well, what does this have to do with me? This has to do with shipping companies. But remember, when you're billing, when you're levying, when you're taxing shipping companies anywhere between $100 per ton of CO2 to almost $400 per ton of CO2, that cost gets placed back on you and I as the consumers. Higher shipping costs mean higher import costs, and that means that people like you and I pay more at the checkout line. In other words, they might be calling this a levy and not a tax, but for those of us who are consumers, it is a tax on carbon. Now, agriculture and farmers will be disproportionately hit by this tax. 80% of the grains grown around the world are shipped. And in fact, for many food products, shipping makes up to 10% of the cost of food. So what you're looking at are not small numbers. You could be looking at a decent increase in food at the grocery store just from this levy. Now there's another part of this, and this is biofuels. Because this particular levy favors low emissions fuels, we could see a rush towards more biofuels, which in theory could help some farmers. And that all sounds green and fine and dandy, but what it does is it helps push food crops into the fuel and oil industry, which tightens supplies and again pushes food prices up. So in essence, this system could start pushing productive farmland from food production into fuel production, because these ships take a lot of fuel. It's not really a sustainable plan, though, is it? Now, to be fair, the United States has been opposed to this plan. This plan originally came out last April. They're supposed to vote on it either today or tomorrow. The US has gone as far as threatening sanctions and visa restrictions to other countries who vote in favor of this plan. But as we know, the draft amendment passed back in April. They're likely going to vote this in this week. What that means for US agriculture is that when we ship soy, corn, and other agricultural goods overseas, we're going to have to pay the price at the port. And if our ships don't meet their standards, we're going to be paying more at the ports, which means that our crops and our food will become less attractive to buyers. So they may not be forcing our hand at it. They might be saying, hey, we're the UN, we're a democratic organization that of elected officials from, maybe we even include countries that don't have elections, but we're fair, we represent the people. But whether you agree to this or not, you will automatically be impacted. If you land a ship at a port where this levy is in place, you'll be impacted. So in order for U.S. agriculture to remain competitive, we would actually have to either upgrade our ships, which, there's going to be a lot of countries that put a lot of effort into this, or we're going to have to, take the cut, pay the farmers less. That's what they usually do. So in other words, the IMO doing this could actually tilt the playing field a little bit. They could tilt the playing field in favor of who they think is in compliance with their rules, the UN's rules. Now, some people would refer to this as taxation without representation. And like I said, technically it's not, because the UN is made up of a bunch of elected officials from around the world, representatives of their countries, and they get elected by the people. And so therefore, the UN must be democratic in some sort of way, even though they have members who are from totalitarian states, dictatorships, you name it. I don't think that they could actually say that they're representing the people when they have people who are voting on this stuff who have absolutely no duty to a constituency. I mean, it's that simple. It's not. Now, here's another thing about this. As this levy system plays out, there's another UN initiative that's stepping in as well. It's called the UN Tax Convention. Now, this is supposed to be setting collective and cooperative tax rules between countries. It doesn't create a global tax yet, although what the IMO is doing is creating a global tax for this global authority. What it's actually doing is laying the groundwork for global fiscal rules. When you connect this with the IMO and this central tax cooperative, whatever they want to call it, what you're actually seeing is a pattern of fiscal centralization emerging, global centralization of fiscal rules. Now let's be real here, guys. Taxation is the backbone of power. It's basically what gives governments control over currencies, products, every aspect of your life. So what the IMO is actually doing here is getting a foothold in global governance. They're getting a foothold by collecting billions of dollars a year and then choosing who they want to succeed, and levying, fining, taxing those that they don't want to succeed. I think even, when they call this thing a levy, it's a test case for something much bigger coming. So is this UN tax convention cooperative. I don't think it's a question of whether or not we should clean up shipping, make things a little more environmentally friendly. I think everybody's kind of supportive of that. What this comes down to is more or less who gets to decide, who pays, and who's going to benefit from it all. What's going to happen when these taxes and levies start functioning in everyday life? What's going to happen when they start putting a levy on the way that the agricultural products in the ship were grown before they were transported? It's all coming. It's all in the pipeline with the United Nations. The fact that they're taxing carbon, though, you have to give it to them. That's one of the smartest ideas ever. We are in a carbon ecology. Everything is made out of carbon. If you start taxing carbon, you can tax the entire world systematically. And the more you tax them, the more they have to abide by your rules, the more, centralized the governance of our societies become. It's kind of like, you have all these states have all these rules. Federal government has its rules. If a state doesn't want to go along with the federal government's rules, the federal government has the opportunity of sending the military in to enforce the federal rules. Eisenhower did it in Arkansas when they wouldn't allow black children into their schools. He sent the Army in. He sent the airborne in and said, you're going to let them into the school because it's a federal law. That power is slowly being given to the United Nations. What's the difference, right? We're United States. Let's be a part of the United Nations. It's freaking scary if you ask me. All of this is just, centralizing control, and they're hiding it. They're greenwashing it, hiding it behind a green label. Anyway, guys, I don't know if they actually are going to vote this through or not. My gut tells me it's going to get voted in today or tomorrow. And when they do, this is going to be the first actual levy, tax, fee, whatever it is, coming directly from the UN on private corporations at ports of countries that agree to this new thing, of member states of the UN. And this is only the beginning. this is the first levy or taxation that the UN is putting out there. And honestly, this UN tax convention to build this cooperative, the UN currently gets its funds from member states paying into it. What they're doing now is they're starting to pass this off onto the consumer. They're starting to remove the middleman, remove the power of the middleman, the states. They don't want people like the United States to be able to back out of their agenda. What they want is the ultimate control. So they're going to use those member states that are agreeing with what they want to do to implement these new things. And remember what I said, taxation is the foundation of governance. It's been used, gosh, I mean, who's that Chinese guy that went around cutting people's heads off to intimidate them? Can't remember his name right now, but he's the one who came up with the concept of currency, and he used taxation to enforce that currency so that instead of using gold, people would use worthless paper dollars. It was genius. You know, you have to pay me in those paper dollars. You have to pay your taxes to my kingdom. If you don't go out and earn those paper dollars, then you can't play the game. That's still kind of the game today, is if you don't go along with society, we're going to excommunicate you. You won't be able to function without society. I think what the UN is doing is a test. And I think it's going to pass. And I think it's just the very beginning of what's to come. And like I said, it will have an impact on agriculture. It will have an impact on food supplies. And even if we don't want it, even if we say as the United States, we're not partaking in this, it doesn't matter. Because that's how much control they already have. Everybody is calling for a much colder, stormier winter. What does that mean for you? Well, it means that there could be possible power outages and some very long, dark days, because as you know, the days are only getting shorter from here on out. Yanasa Trading Co. has finally launched its bee yard collection. We currently have natural beeswax candles for sale on Yanasa Trading Co. These candles last about 10 hours each. They're clean burning. Unlike paraffin candles that put toxins into the air, beeswax candles actually help neutralize the air. We only use beeswax candles in our household because we care about our health, we care about our children's health, and we like the smell of warm honey in the dead of winter. Check out Yanasa Trading Co. and order your beeswax candles today.